Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the AEW Revolution review. AEW Revolution was from the Chase Center in San Francisco, California. And what an awesome, great show AEW Revolution was last night. Really enjoyed it from beginning to end. The build to this show was absolutely terrible. I mean, the only match that stood out going into the show was MJF and BRYAN DANIELSON in the 60-minute Iron Man match for the World Championship. But aside from the build being terrible, the show delivered, and it was great. In my opinion, it's pay-per-view of the year, or candidate for pay-per-view of the year. A lot of the matches were very good, and they delivered. So, match card that we got for Revolution for 0 Hour, which was the pre-show, we had Mark Briscoe and the Lucha Brothers, Rey Fenix and Penta Oscuro. They ended up taking on Daivari, Josh Woods, and Tony Nese, Mark Sterling's jobber guys. And then for the regular card, we had Ricky Starks versus Chris Jericho. We had Jungle Boy versus Christian Cage in a final burial match. The AEW Trios Championship was on the line, where the Elite defend the titles against the House of Black. The AEW Women's World Championship was on the line in a three-way match. Jamie Hayter defended the title against Saraya and Ruby Soho. We had a Texas Death match, Hangman and Paige versus John Moxley. The TNT Championship, or the Hot Potato Championship, was on the line, where Samoa Joe defended the title against Wardlow, and the winner will get to face Hobbs on Dynamite this Wednesday. We also had the World Tag Team Championship on the line, where the Guns, Austin and Colton, defend the titles against Danhausen, Orange Cassidy, the Acclaimed, Jay Lethal, and Jeff Jarrett in a four-way. And then the main event. Of course, the AEW World Championship was on the line. MJF defended the title against BRYAN Danielson in a 60-minute Iron Man match. But overall, AEW Revolution last night was an awesome show. Good show from beginning to end. But anyways, let's jump right into the review. Gonna start the match that was on the 0 Hour, the pre-show. And it was Mark Briscoe and the Lucha Brothers, Penta Oscuro and Rey Fenix, versus Daivari, Josh Woods, and Tony Nese, the varsity athletes. So this was a pretty good match. I was surprised with this match. I thought this match was going to suck, because you have Tony Nese and Josh Woods and Mark Sterling, which the varsity athletes are just channel changing garbage whenever they're on Dynamite, or in this case on Rampage. But Tony Nese, I said this before, he needs to get away from Mark Sterling. He's a talented guy, talented athlete, and they're just wasting him here with Josh Woods and Mark Sterling. The varsity athletes, more like the varsity jobbers. But the match got underway with Penta and Tony Nese. Tony Nese was looking to go for a lockup, and he was starting to pose and flex, which annoyed Penta. So Penta responded with a taunt of his own, and then all six men got into the ring. They had a standoff. Mark Briscoe and Fenix ended up taking down Woods and Daivari on the outside. Penta ended up hitting a pump handle driver, which he got a near fall. Penta was looking to go for a package pile driver, but Mark Sterling hopped on the apron. He got involved, and we had Penta bringing in Mark Sterling into the ring the very hard way. So Tony Nese took advantage of that, and he took control of the match. So he ended up tagging in Josh Woods. So Woods and Nese end up double teaming on Penta. Woods continued to attack on Penta, and he ended up hitting a vertical suplex to Penta, which he went for the cover. Penta ended up kicking out. So Woods tagged in Daivari, Ari Daivari. Ari Daivari started punching away at Penta's head, and Daivari then tagged back in Tony Nese, and so we had Daivari and Tony Nese end up hitting a double vertical suplex to Penta, and Tony Nese ended up going for the cover. Penta ended up kicking out. Nese then tagged back in Daivari. Daivari ended up laying a boot to Penta's gut. So Penta ended up turning things around, and then Daivari ended up getting back in control. He rolled up Penta. Penta ended up kicking out. So we had Woods and Daivari and Tony Nese. They quickly tagged each other in, doing some strikes, and then Penta started fighting them off. So Penta ended up doing a monkey flip off of Josh Woods, which he turned into a DDT to Tony Nese and Daivari. So Penta ended up taking in Rey Fenix, and Fenix at this point in the match was just on fire, and he was delivering some offense on both Tony Nese and Daivari. And then Josh Woods ended up taking down Fenix. Fenix ended up getting back up, but he was taken down by Woods with a rising knee strike. And then Woods followed that up with a corkscrew brainbuster into the turnbuckle on Fenix. So we had Woods end up going for the cover, and Penta broke up the pin. So Fenix was then sent into the corner by Tony Nese after Tony Nese made the tag from Josh Woods. So Fenix reversed that into a Poison Rana, and he tagged in Mark Briscoe. So we had Mark Briscoe coming in. He ended up chopping away at the Varsity Athletes. So Daivari ended up getting a tag. He was met with some hard strikes by Briscoe, to which Briscoe delivered a neckbreaker to Daivari. So then a steel chair came into play. So Mark Briscoe ended up doing a dive over the top rope, taking out Daivari on the outside. Tony Nese interrupted Mark Briscoe, and Tony Nese then tagged in Daivari. And we had a Tower of Doom, which Briscoe ended up getting sent into the canvas, only for Tony Nese to hit a 450 splash. And then Tony Nese ended up doing a sneak pin attempt, to which Penta ended up breaking up the pin. So we had, later on, the Lucha Brothers ended up taking out Josh Woods. They set Tony Nese and Daivari up for a combo gory special, and then a package pile driver. So Daivari was down. Briscoe leapt off the top rope with the froggy bow, and he ended up going for the cover. And there you go. Mark Briscoe and the Lucha Brothers ended up winning this 6-man tag team match. Post-match, Mark Sterling and the Varsity Athletes end up leaving. Alex Abrahantes end up catching Mark Sterling. Abrahantes end up sending Sterling into the ring. And then Penta delivered a big package pile driver to Mark Sterling. So then we had Mark Briscoe and the Lucha Brothers end up celebrating as Tony Nese, Josh Woods, and Daivari end up pulling Mark Sterling out of the ring. And pretty much that was basically that. Overall, this was a very good match. I was surprised by this match. All the guys here did good. The wrestling was good here. And, seeing Rey Fenix on fire at a point in that match was just awesome. But overall, very good match, even though in my mind, before going into this match, I was like, this match is going to suck because of, Mark Sterling and his jobbers in there. But very good match it was for the 0 hour pre-show. And then Revolution opened up with Chris Jericho versus Ricky Starks. And all of the Jericho Appreciation Society was banned from ringside, so Jericho and Starks went one-on-one. Very good match this was. So Starks, he came out, his ribs were taped up. So the match started off with Starks and Jericho going at it. They were trading blows. Starks ended up getting the upper hand with some left and rights in the corner to Jericho. Jericho was able to turn things around. He started delivering some chops to Starks. Starks ended up taking down Jericho with a shoulder tackle, and the crowd was just, pumped up for Starks there. They were giving him a good reaction, and the crowd all through the night was just awesome. Just absolutely amazing crowd there in San Francisco. So Jericho ended up going to the outside. He ended up taking a breather. And Starks ended up delivering a dive to him. So Starks ended up keeping the attack on Jericho. He sent Jericho into the barricade. And then he brought Jericho back to the ring. Jericho then ended up hitting a kick to Starks, which then he took control of the match. So Jericho ended up sending Starks into the corner. And then Jericho started taunting the crowd. And he ended up flipping off the crowd. So this gave Starks a chance to strike back to Jericho with some forearms, but Jericho, the Ocho, ended up taking him down, and then he ended up going for a lion salt, to which Starks ended up rolling out of the way. So Starks ended up stopping from doing a back body drop, and he was sent to the top rope. Jericho then ended up sending Starks flying off the apron. So the crowd was booing away at Jericho. So Jericho ended up going out of the ring, dealt with Starks. He ended up slamming Starks into the barricade, and then he sent Starks back to the ring. Jericho ended up bringing Starks into the corner. He was laying some punches, and he ended up driving his boot into Starks' neck. Starks then fought back, started delivering some chops to Jericho, and then Jericho ended up catching Starks with a double underhook backbreaker. So Jericho, later on, he ended up doing a abdominal stretch to Starks. He ended up attacking Starks' ribs with an elbow. So Starks fought back, ended up hitting a right hand to Jericho, which he followed up with a DDT off the top rope, which was great. So Starks ended up going for the cover, to which Jericho kicked out. Starks then headed to the top rope, but he was intercepted by Jericho. Jericho was looking to go for a superplex, but Starks ended up dropping him down to the canvas, and then Starks ended up flying into a lifted knee from the Ocho from Jericho, and he followed up with a Death Valley driver. So Jericho ended up going for a chop. He ended up sending Starks into the corner. So Jericho was going for a code breaker, but Starks ended up reversing that into a powerbomb. Starks ended up going for the cover, to which Jericho ended up kicking out. So Starks was looking to go for a spear to Jericho, and then Jericho ended up delivering the code breaker to Starks. So Jericho ended up going for the cover. Starks kicked out. So Starks, eventually later on, he ended up hitting the spear to Jericho. Starks ended up going for the cover. Jericho kicked out. And now Starks was looking frustrated because Jericho ended up kicking out of the spear. So both Jericho and Starks were trading blows. Starks got knocked down by Jericho. He ended up taking a thrust kick to the face by Starks. Starks ended up hitting the turnbuckle for a moonsault. Jericho ended up slipping away. He ended up catching Starks in the walls of Jericho. So Starks ended up fighting out of the walls of Jericho. He ended up getting back to his feet, and he was looking to go for a single leg crab to Jericho. So then Sammy Guevara ended up coming out. So Sammy Guevara came out, and then Action Andretti came out of nowhere and took down Sammy Guevara on the outside. So at this point, somehow, Floyd, Jericho's baseball bat, was placed in the corner. So the ref was distracted. Aubrey Edwards was distracted by Action Andretti and Guevara on the outside. So Jericho ended up hitting Starks with Floyd the Bat to break up the single leg crab. So Jericho was then attempting to go for the Judas effect. The Judas effect got blocked by Starks. So Starks ended up fighting back. He ended up hitting the Rochambeau on Jericho. He ended up going for the cover. And there you go. Ricky Starks ended up winning the match. So overall, this was a very good match here. Starks was the guy to win the match. He was the right guy to win the match. Hopefully, Jericho ends up moving on now from Starks. Starks moves on from Jericho. And we get another opponent for Starks. But overall, very good match it was. And then we went to Christian Cage versus Jungle Boy. This was a final burial match. This was like a buried alive match. Buried alive match mixed with, a casket match. But this was very good here. Both Christian and Jungle Boy went to war with each other here. And, with Christian being out with that injury for, a while, this made up for all that time that Jungle Boy, had to wait to get his hands on Christian Cage. Still no Luchasaurus. I'm like, where's Luchasaurus been? We haven't seen Luchasaurus in a while. So the match started with Jungle Boy and Christian going right at it. So both of them were exchanging blows. Jungle Boy ended up getting the upper hand on Christian. Christian ended up running away from Jungle Boy. And Jungle Boy ended up chasing Christian up the stairs. So both Christian and Jungle Boy were taking swings at each other. And the fight between them made it way back down the steps, the ring steps toward ringside. Christian ended up trying to avoid Jungle Boy. He left the ring again. He started heading up the ramp. And he realized that he was possibly going to get closed to the casket area. So this gave Jungle Boy an opening to keep back on the attack from Christian. So then both Christian and Jungle Boy end up heading back to the ring. Jungle Boy started swinging away with some right hands. Christian ended up slipping out. He pulled Jungle Boy down by his hair, sent him to the canvas. Christian took control of the match. He ended up staying on top of things with some rights and lefts to Jungle Boy. Eventually, Christian ended up pulling Jungle Boy's hair again. Christian ended up putting a boot on Jungle Boy's chest, started gloating to Jungle Boy. So he ended up stepping on Jungle Boy's hair while he was pulling Jungle Boy up by his arms. So Christian ended up propping Jungle Boy on the ropes, digging him into the ropes, started taunting him, but Jungle Boy started fighting back. He ended up sending Christian to the outside before he ended up hitting a tope dive. Jungle Boy ended up following by sending Christian into the barricade, and then he ended up sending Christian into the ring steps. So we had Christian being busted open because Jungle Boy ended up slamming Christian's skull into the ring steps. So Christian was busted open because of that. So Jungle Boy was looking to stomp Christian's arm. Christian ended up pulling it away, and then he ended up scooping Jungle Boy's leg out from under his leg to drop him on the step. So Jungle Boy went down hard at that attempt from Christian. So then Christian ended up stealing his belt. He ended up stealing the belt that Jungle Boy was wearing, and he used it to whip Jungle Boy across the back. And he did that right in front of Jungle Boy's sister, who was sitting at ringside. So we had Christian end up whipping Jungle Boy with the belt. This continued up the ramp, and this was taking us closer to the casket area. And then Christian started choking Jungle Boy with the belt. Christian ended up letting go. He ended up opening the lid of the casket, and inside the casket was a couple of steel chairs inside. Christian ended up pulling the chairs out, and this gave Jungle Boy a chance to strike back at Christian, and he was looking to send Christian into the casket. So Christian ended up fighting back, and Christian ended up hitting a back body drop, which sent Jungle Boy onto the pile of dirt that was there next to the casket. So Cage ended up setting up a chair. Christian ended up grabbing Jungle Boy, bringing him to his feet. He delivered the kill switch to Jungle Boy onto the chair, but Jungle Boy ended up sending Christian flying off the stage, and Jungle Boy ended up hitting a senton dive onto Christian. Jungle Boy ended up bringing Christian back onto the stage. So Jungle Boy had a chair in hand. Christian was begging Jungle Boy off. So then we had Christian end up delivering a low blow kick to Jungle Boy. So he ended up tossing Jungle Boy into the casket. So Cage then closed the casket. So Jungle Boy ended up grabbing it, and he ended up slamming Jungle Boy headfirst onto the casket several times. So Christian ended up dragging Jungle Boy into the casket. He ended up blowing him a kiss, and Christian ended up starting to close the lid. Jungle Boy ended up fighting back. Jungle Boy ended up getting a right hand to Christian's face, and Christian ended up fighting back. He ended up throwing a fistful of dirt into Jungle Boy's eyes. Christian ended up setting Jungle Boy up, ended up hitting the kill switch again onto the stage, and he ended up setting Jungle Boy's head up on a chair. Christian ended up grabbing a chair. He was looking to go for the concerto. Jungle Boy ended up sliding out of the way. Jungle Boy had a shovel in hand. He ended up smacking Christian upside the head with the shovel, and so it was back and forth between them. Christian ended up fighting his way out. He grabbed the shovel. He ended up taking a swing at Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy ended up ducking, and so Jungle Boy ended up dropping Christian, and he ended up locking in the snare trap with the shovel. The shovel was, in Christian's mouth, and we had Christian end up looking out of it, and Jungle Boy was the one setting Christian up on a chair. So Jungle Boy was initially attempting to go for the concerto. So Christian's head was on the chair, and so Jungle Boy ended up doing the concerto. You heard a loud crack as Jungle Boy ended up hitting the chair to Christian's head. So Jungle Boy ended up dragging Christian to the casket. He put Christian into the casket, and he was looking over Christian, and Jungle Boy ended up giving a kiss to Christian on his forehead, slammed the lid down, and then the casket ended up going, into the ground, and there you go. Jungle Boy ended up winning the match. But this was a very good match. Jungle Boy finally ended up getting his hands on Christian after Christian was out with injury, and Jungle Boy had nothing to do, for that time, but wait for Christian to come back to get his hands on him. But it was a good match, and both guys, went to war with each other finally. And then we had the World Trios Championship match. We had the House of Black, Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews versus the Elite, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. And this was another good match here. This was very entertaining, but this match came on the way just to get it on the pay-per-view. There was no story between the House of Black and the Elite. This was just thrown together for the pay-per-view. We should have got story with House of Black and the Elite leading up to the pay-per-view, which we did not get. But the match paid off here. So the match started off with Kenny Omega and Buddy Matthews. Both guys were circling the canvas, and then they ended up exchanging holds. Buddy Matthews ended up getting the early advantage of the match. Buddy Matthews ended up going to work on Kenny Omega's arm. And Kenny Omega ended up reversing that, ended up taking Buddy Matthews down. So both men were exchanging holds and strikes. Malachi Black delivered a blind tag. He ended up telling Buddy Matthews to step back. And so Malachi Black went at it with Kenny Omega. So Malachi Black and Kenny Omega were circling the ring. Malachi Black ended up laying in a kick to Omega. Both of them end up locking up. They end up going for kicks. And Kenny Omega ended up taking Malachi's arm out. And we had Malachi Black end up spinning Kenny Omega around. Kenny Omega ended up slipping out of that, ended up hitting an arm drag. Malachi Black ended up getting one of his own, and he locked in the arm of Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega ended up making it back to his feet, ended up avoiding a couple of kicks from Malachi Black. Malachi Black ended up slipping out of a one-winged angel attempt by Omega. And both Malachi Black and Omega ended up sitting down in the ring. They were staring at each other. So both men were to their feet. Kenny Omega ended up stepping back. He tagged in Matt Jackson. So Matt Jackson ended up calling for Brody King to be tagged in. So Malachi Black ended up tagging in Brody. Brody ended up stepping up to Matt. And we had, Brody King started unloading on Matt Jackson. So we had all six men end up being in the ring. They were squaring off against each other. Nick Jackson ended up pinning a face breaker on Buddy Matthews. And the House of Black were on the outside. Matt Jackson ended up climbing up for a crossbody. So inside the ring, it was Kenny Omega and Brody King going at it. Kenny Omega ended up blocking the offense of Brody King. And Kenny Omega ended up hitting the head scissors that forced Brody King to the outside. And then Omega ended up hitting a dive to Brody King. Brody King was brought back to the ring. Nick Jackson ended up hitting a 450. And he ended up going for the cover, to which Brody ended up kicking out. Nick Jackson ended up running to the ropes. And he was sent crashing by Brody King. He ended up attacking Matt Jackson and knocked Kenny Omega down before leaving the ring. So we had a point later on in the match where Nick Jackson was going for a move on the ropes, and he was distracted by Julia Hart. Julia Hart ended up attempting to knock Nick Jackson off of the apron. So Brody King ended up getting involved, and he was sent off the apron by Kenny Omega. You had later on, we had Malachi Black end up keeping Buddy Matthews and Brody King back. He ended up going after Kenny Omega. So the Bucks end up dropping the House of Black off the apron. He ended up going after Malachi Black and Brody King with some kicks. So we had the Elite end up hitting the BT trigger on Malachi Black. And we had Buddy Matthews end up breaking up the pin. And you had, at one point, Julia Hart end up getting kicked off the apron. So we had Malachi Black and Buddy Matthews. They end up hitting Dante's Inferno on Matt Jackson. And there you go. The House of Black, Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews ended up winning the match. And they are the new AEW World Trios Champions. So the lights end up cutting out post-match. And when the lights came back on, the House of Black disappeared. And pretty much that was that. But overall, very good match this was, even though there was no story leading up to them having the match at the pay-per-view last night. But hopefully now Tony Khan can book the House of Black, much better now that they are the new Trios champions. And then we had the three-way match for the AEW Women's World Championship. Saraya versus Ruby Soho versus Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter defending the title. This was another good match here. Saraya and Jamie Hayter started off the match. They ended up attacking each other first. Saraya then left the ring. She tripped up Jamie Hayter and brought her out of the ring. Saraya ended up following up, taking Jamie Hayter to the barricade. And then she ended up getting hit by Ruby Soho, which Ruby Soho ended up sending her over the barricade. Soho ended up stepping onto the barricade before leaping off, hitting both of Saraya and Jamie Hayter. So the brawl ended up continuing in the crowd, and Saraya was in control. She was focusing on Jamie Hayter as they headed back into the ring. Saraya started beating Hayter down in the corner. Saraya ended up staying on the attack. She ended up dropping Jamie Hayter back first onto the canvas. So Saraya ended up going for the cover. Jamie Hayter ended up kicking out. So Saraya ended up putting Jamie Hayter on the ropes. She delivered some knees to Jamie Hayter's chest. And Saraya was looking to go for a suplex on the apron. Jamie Hayter ended up fighting back. She ended up sending Saraya toward the ring post. And then sent her back first onto the apron. So Jamie Hayter went back into the ring, but she was taken down by Ruby Soho. And she ended up getting sent to the corner. She ended up hitting an STO for a near fall. So Soho delivered a rear chin lock that took Jamie Hayter down to the canvas. Jamie Hayter was trying to fight back. So Jamie Hayter ended up fighting to her feet. Ruby Soho was still on Jamie Hayter's back. She ended up sending Ruby Soho into the corner. And Jamie Hayter was in control of the match. She ended up pinning both Soho and Saraya. And she ended up bringing them up and over for a double suplex. So all three women later on went back to their feet because Ruby delivered a Sayato suplex on Saraya. And then Jamie Hayter then ended up hitting the Hatebreaker onto Ruby Soho. So all three women were back to their feet. Saraya ended up finding herself in the middle of an attack by both Ruby and Jamie Hayter. They ended up sending Saraya toward the ropes. And we had Toni Storm trying to get involved on the apron, but she was dropped by Jamie Hayter. And Jamie Hayter ended up getting hit by Saraya. Britt Baker, who was also down there, Britt Baker got involved on the apron. Ruby ended up hitting the Destination Unknown onto Saraya. And she ended up going for the cover. Saraya kicked out. And so then Ruby and Jamie Hayter started going at it. Saraya ended up getting caught in the crosshairs between them. Jamie Hayter and Ruby started exchanging near falls. And Jamie Hayter ended up catching Ruby with a surprise pin attempt. So there you go. Jamie Hayter ended up winning the match, retaining the AEW Women's World Championship. Post-match, Toni Storm ended up coming into the ring to attack Jamie Hayter, but she was intercepted by Britt Baker. Saraya ended up getting involved, ended up standing tall. Ruby ended up sending them both out of the ring. So Jamie Hayter ended up showing her appreciation to Ruby Soho. She ended up raising Ruby Soho's arm. But Ruby Soho ended up delivering a no future kick to Jamie Hayter. So we had Ruby Soho end up attacking Britt Baker next, as Toni Storm ended up slamming a camera down at ringside. So Saraya then ended up handing Ruby Soho a can of spray paint and allowed Ruby Soho to paint an L on Jamie Hayter. So Ruby Soho was making a statement here. So Ruby Soho joins Toni Storm and Saraya. Ruby Soho ended up turning heel. So there we go. We got the new member of the group with Saraya and Toni Storm. So, but overall, very good match this was from the woman. And then we had the Texas Death Match. Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page. My God, was this match fucking awesome. This was fantastic. Great match. A lot of blood. You had barbed wire being used. You had a barbed wire on a table. You had bricks being used. 2 bricks being used. A chain. So it was just crazy. So we had Hangman and Paige coming out to Ghost Riders in the Sky. And then it followed up with Jon Moxley coming down to the ring. So Moxley and Paige end up going right at it before the bell ended up ringing. So Moxley and Hangman and Paige started off in the crowd area. Mox and Paige started brawling. before they got into the ring. They were exchanging strikes. Paige ended up heading to the ring, and then he got hit with a clothesline by Moxley. So the referee started a count as Moxley ended up grabbing some barbed wire from ringside, and Paige ended up getting back to a standing position. Moxley ended up charging at Paige with the barbed wire. Paige turned her around, started raking the forehead of Moxley. So Paige then delivered a boot to Moxley after that. And somehow this match, I thought there was going to be, pin attempt, in the match or a pinfall, but basically this played out like a last man standing match. So, like I said, Paige delivered a boot to Moxley, started stomping away at him. Paige started wrapping his leg with the barbed wire, and we saw Moxley unable to fully stand up. Mox ended up stopping the barbed wire boot from getting to him. He ended up taking Paige down. So Paige ended up getting back up. Mox ended up grabbing another bunch of barbed wire, and he ended up taking it to Paige's head. So the referee ended up starting another count, and Moxley then pulled out a fork. He pulled out a fork that was from his boot, and he was looking to do more damage to Paige. So Paige ended up taking Moxley down. Mox, however, locked in a triangle hold, and he started stabbing Paige's face with the fork. So the ref started another count on Paige. Moxley was looking to go for some more weapons. He ended up jabbing Paige's head with the fork again. And then Moxley ended up finding a chair. And the chair was wrapped in barbed wire. So Moxley brought that into the ring. He set up the chair with the wrap with the barbed wire in the corner. So Paige ended up fighting back with some forearms to Moxley. Paige whipped Moxley toward the corner, but Moxley ended up stopping himself. He ended up sending Paige into the barbed wire chair, and instead Hangman collided face first into the chair. So Paige went face first into the barbed wire chair. He had Paige climbing the turnbuckle, and he wrapped the barbed wire around his torso. And then he ended up pinning a moonsault onto Moxley on the outside. So Paige was clutching himself in pain. The referee was counting. So Mox was able to beat the count. Paige ended up sending Moxley back into the ring. And that was a cool spot there with the moonsault off the top. And Paige ended up taking out Moxley with the barbed wire wrapped around his torso. So Paige ended up setting the chair up on the outside. And he was propping a board with barbed wire. And I know I said earlier it was a table with barbed wire, but it was really a board. So we had Paige end up sliding back to the ring. Moxley ended up catching him with a cutter. So Mox continued to attack on Paige. He ended up heading to the outside, and Moxley ended up finding 2 bricks and a chain. So he ended up coming back to the ring. Moxley sandwiched Paige's hand between the bricks. And so Moxley ended up driving his boot into the bricks with Paige's hand in there. And then he ended up taking Paige out with a pile driver onto the chair. So the referee started counting on Paige. Both guys were a bloody mess here. So Paige ended up slowly getting to his feet. Moxley started wrapping the chain around Paige, and he locked in what looked like an STF. So Paige ended up fighting back, and Paige ended up biting Moxley on the thumb. And he ended up breaking the hold. Moxley was looking frustrated, and he ended up going to the outside. He ended up setting up another barbed wire board across a couple of chairs. And he ended up intercepting Paige back into the ring. So Moxley was looking for a pile driver on the barbed wire chair, but it got countered by Paige. So Moxley ended up taking a clothesline by Paige. Both men ended up slowly making it up to their feet. Paige ended up catching Moxley, ended up hitting a four-way slam onto the barbed wire chair, to which Paige followed up with a deadeye. which both good moves there, both good spots. So both men were struggling to get back up to their feet. The referee started a new count. Paige ended up finally getting back up to his feet. So we had Moxley end up beating the count before leaving the ring. Paige ended up seeing this, and he leapt off the top rope onto Moxley on the outside, which sent Moxley through the barbed wire board that was set up on the ramp. So we had Paige end up getting back up as the ref started a count for Moxley, and Moxley ended up finally breaking free of the barbed wire, the barbed wire board. He ended up getting to his feet, and Paige ended up awaiting him on the apron. Paige was up on the top. He got caught on the ropes by Moxley, which ended up getting a double underhook. He ended up raking the back of Paige. So Paige ended up turning that around. Moxley ended up fighting back. He grabbed the barbed wire, pulling it against the back of Paige. And we had Paige end up grinding the barbed wire into the face of Moxley. Moxley ended up falling onto the prop chair, the prop barbed wire chair. And then Paige ended up flying off the turnbuckle onto the other barbed wire board that was on the outside. But it was crazy. So at the end of the match, Paige got to the apron. He was looking to go for the buckshot lariat to Moxley. And this time, the buckshot lariat connected to Moxley. He ended up sending Moxley over the top rope. Paige had the chain wrapped around Moxley's neck. So Paige ended up choking Moxley out over the top rope with the chain. And Moxley was forced to tap out. So there you go. Hangman and Paige ended up winning the match. But overall, this was a crazy, brutal match here. This was a fantastic match. Both Moxley and Paige went to war here, and both guys just gave it all they got. They were a bloodied mess coming out of this match. But a lot of good spots, in this match. In my opinion, this will be match of the year candidate. But overall, just great match. And then we had the TNT Championship match, Wardlow versus Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe defend the title. Just the TNT Championship, I just don't care for it because they are booking this title as a hot potato title. So whoever won the match will get to face Powerhouse Hobbs. So this was, an okay match here. Was it great? No. But we had Wardlow immediately going after Samoa Joe as the bell ended up ringing. Powerhouse Hobbs was watching from the stands. So Wardlow ended up sending Joe to the outside. He ended up throwing him into the barricade twice. And then Joe ended up turning things around. He ended up hitting an elbow dive through the ropes to Wardlow. Joe then delivered a chop before bringing Wardlow back into the ring. He was hitting a few right hands in the corner. Wardlow ended up getting sent into the corner. He ended up popping onto the ropes. He ended up dropping Joe down to the canvas. So Wardlow ended up sending Joe to the corner. And we had Wardlow mounting Joe up with some elbow strikes. Joe got up to his feet, and Wardlow ended up hitting the suplex. And he ended up hitting some more elbows to Joe. So Wardlow was in control. He ended up bringing Joe to his feet, propping him up on the ropes. He ended up hitting a chop, ended up sending him to the corner for some shoulder thrusts. So Samoa Joe was being worn down by Wardlow on the ropes. So Joe ended up slipping out of Wardlow's grip, started unloading on him, started stomping away at Wardlow's knee. So Joe was in control of the match. He started punching away at Wardlow, but Wardlow ended up sending Joe into the corner, only for Joe to hit an STO to drop Wardlow down hard. So we had later on in the match, we had Joe turn things around. He was locking in a rear naked choke on Wardlow before bringing Wardlow to the canvas with the body scissors. So Wardlow was struggling, and he ended up inching towards the ropes, but he was fading, only to power his way to the ropes, to getting a foot on the rope to break up the body scissors. And then Joe was getting very frustrated. So Joe ended up bringing Wardlow up to his shoulders to deliver a Death Valley driver, but he ended up doing it to Wardlow. Joe ended up going for the cover, and Wardlow ended up kicking out. So Wardlow was fighting out of a muscle buster attempt from Joe, and he ended up hitting a modified powerbomb on Joe. Joe ended up getting turned over by Wardlow, but Joe ended up responding with a clothesline. Joe started taunting the crowd, and he was looking to go for a powerbomb on Wardlow, but Wardlow ended up escaping. He ended up hitting a drop kick to Joe, followed up by a rear naked choke. So Joe was fading, and the referee ended up calling for the bell. And there we go. Wardlow ended up winning the match, and Wardlow is once again the TNT champion. And I did not give a shit. I don't care about the TNT championship and how it's being booked. It's a hot potato title. It went from Wardlow to Joe, back to Wardlow, back to Joe, and now back to Wardlow. Hot potato, hot potato. So, post-match, Wardlow ended up celebrating as the ref ended up presenting Wardlow with the hot potato title, the TNT championship. Hobbs was up in the stands, and he symbolized, his shot at the title on Dynamite this Wednesday. So it's going to be Wardlow versus Hobbs Wednesday night on Dynamite for the TNT championship. So Hobbs and Wardlow were staring each other down, and that was that. But Hobbs really needs to win this match. I know it's going to be another hot potato attempt probably on Dynamite this Wednesday, and Hobbs, hopefully winning the TNT championship. Hobbs needs to hold the title, in my opinion. So then we had the four-way match for the AEW World Tag Team Championship. The Acclaimed versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal versus Orange Cassidy and Danhausen versus Austin and Colton Gunn. The Guns defending the titles. Yeah, Jeff Jarrett is 2023, and he's in a four-way match for the tag team titles. Can you believe that? So the match started off with Jeff Jarrett and Orange Cassidy going at it. Jarrett ended up mocking Orange Cassidy with the strut. He did a strut. And Orange Cassidy ended up taking down Jeff Jarrett. He ended up dodging Jarrett, does a strut of his own. So Orange Cassidy did a strut of his own. He ended up putting his hands in his pockets. Orange Cassidy delivering some offense. He ended up faking Jeff Jarrett with a punch. And then he tagged in Danhausen. So Danhausen and Orange Cassidy ended up doubling up on Jay Lethal until Jeff Jarrett ended up intervening. Danhausen ended up going off on them, and Danhausen ended up getting a near fall on Jeff Jarrett. So Jeff Jarrett ended up tagging in Jay Lethal, and Jay Lethal ended up tagging in Colton Gunn. So now the champs had a presence in the match. So yeah, Colton going on the attack on Danhausen, and he ended up rolling up Danhausen, to which Danhausen kicked out. Colton then tagged in Austin Gunn, and then Danhausen ended up ducking out of the way, tagged in Orange Cassidy. Cassidy knocked down Colton, and he ended up hitting Austin with a DDT. Then Colton ended up diving out to drop Colton again. Orange Cassidy was sent up for the Orange Punch on Austin Gunn, but Austin tagged Jay Lethal in. Jay Lethal ended up going on the attack. He ended up hitting the Lethal combination on Orange Cassidy. And we had Orange Cassidy end up reversing a suplex, and then he delivered a Stun Dog Millionaire. And then we had Orange Cassidy tag in Max Caster. Jeff Jarrett ended up coming in, as did Sanjay Dutt. And Sanjay Dutt ended up taking the Sesame Timbers from the Acclaimed. So the Acclaimed ended up celebrating. They ended up getting taken down by the Guns. Jay Lethal ended up taking advantage, and he ended up going after Anthony Bowens. So Jarrett ended up sneaking some offense in, and he ended up getting tagged in. So we had Jarrett and Jay Lethal ended up dropping Bowens with a double leg sweep. So Jarrett ended up keeping on the attack before tagging Jay Lethal back in. Jay Lethal ended up pulling Bowens in for a leg lock as Colton ended up tagging in. So the Guns double teamed on Anthony Bowens before Colton ended up getting a near fall on Bowens. So at the end of the match, we had Satnam Singh end up going in to send the Guns out, and then he was confronted by Danhausen. Sanjay Dutt ended up trying to interfere, but he ended up getting his pencil broken by Danhausen. Orange Cassidy ended up hitting the orange punch on Satnam Singh, and then Billy Gunn ended up hitting the Famouser on Satnam Singh, and then Billy Gunn ended up getting low blowed by his own sons. So that happened. So we had the Guns and the Acclaimed in the ring. Colton ended up stopping a pin from Caster. Bowens and Colton ended up taking their fight to the outside to where Bowens was sent over the barricade. Jeff Jarrett made a blind tag, ended up sending Austin Gunn out. He ended up going for the guitar shot, but Caster ended up getting the guitar instead. So we had Aubrey Edwards end up intervening. She ended up taking the guitar away as Jay Lethal ended up sneaking the weapon in on Max Caster. And then Jeff Jarrett ended up getting a near fall. So Jeff Jarrett started arguing with Aubrey Edwards, and it turned into a shoving contest between Jeff Jarrett and Aubrey Edwards. So this ended up with Austin getting the blind tag, as did Danhausen. So Danhausen ended up cursing Austin Gunn, and he delivered a pump kick, but you had the Guns end up hitting the 310 to Yama on Danhausen. So there you go. The Guns end up winning the match, and they still retain the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Post-match, Renee Paquette ended up interviewing the Guns. They ended up bragging to the crowd. They ended up asking the crowd, who's an ass boy now? So then they have talked about the teams they have beaten, and they started declaring themselves the best tag team in the world. Yeah, okay. And then FTR ended up returning last night. So we had Dax Harwood, Cash Wheeler. They ended up hitting the stage. They ended up rushing down to the ring to go after the Guns. And this ended with a spike pile driver on Colton Gunn, to which FTR ended up hitting the Shatter Machine to Austin Gunn. And pretty much that was that. But overall, this was a pretty decent match here. Main event. The 60-minute Iron Man match for the AEW World Championship. BRYAN DANIELSON versus MJF. MJF defending the title. And this was a awesome main event. Both Bryan and MJF gave it all they got here. You know, this was the standout match on the Revolution card. There was a lot of build, towards this match, which was good. The build was very good. So the match got underway with both Bryan and MJF end up staring each other down. The crowd started showing their support for Bryan. And then both guys, end up circling the ring. Bryan was looking to bait in MJF, and MJF ended up choosing to go outside to take a breather. MJF got back into the ring, ended up hitting an arm drag on Bryan, and then he ended up mocking Bryan. Both guys ended up locking back up. They started exchanging holds, and Bryan connected with a submission hold on the leg. He was wearing MJF down in the process, and he ended up locking in a surfboard type maneuver on MJF. So we had Bryan end up hitting a full Nelson. MJF ended up managing to fight out of the full Nelson. Bryan ended up locking MJF's legs up tight, and he was pulling at MJF's face until the ref ended up getting to a 4 count, which caused Bryan to let the ref know that he has until 5 to break up the full Nelson. So MJF again sent into the corner. Bryan started laying in some hard kicks until Bryce Rumberg, who was the referee, had to intervene. So that led to MJF taking control of the match. He was stopping away at Bryan. So MJF ended up delivering a back body drop twice to Bryan. And then MJF was mocking the crowd. So we had Bryan end up getting the first fall because we had MJF end up barely getting up, and Bryan end up delivering the running knee to MJF. So Bryan had 1, and MJF had 0. But Bryan got back to his feet. He was waiting to hit another Busaku knee to MJF, but MJF collapsed and he low-blowed Bryan. So MJF ended up getting disqualified, and he ended up sneaking 2 quick pinfalls off the back because of the low blow that he delivered to Bryan. So Bryan ended up kicking out of the 3rd attempt, so they were tied up. So Bryan had 2, MJF had 2. So MJF ended up taking another break. He ended up going after Bryan, but Bryan started fighting back. He ended up taking MJF to the outside, started beating him down. So we had MJF end up following up with a chop to Bryan. So MJF ended up running to Bryan, and then Bryan ended up hitting a lariat to MJF, and then started delivering some kicks to MJF. So we had 23 minutes left as Bryce Rumberg ended up checking on both MJF and Bryan. MJF got back to his feet. He was telling Bryce to count Bryan out as he ended up going back to the ring. So Bryce was forced to comply. He started the count. So we had the doctors end up checking on Bryan. So pretty much, MJF earlier ended up breaking the ring post camera off the top of the ring, and he headed to the floor. He ended up going back after Bryan as he sent him face first to the ring post. So pretty much we had MJF end up hitting the heat seeker to Bryan. He ended up getting a 1-up score, so it was 3-2 with just over 19 minutes remaining. So there was a point where MJF was bleeding in the match here. So we have Bryan end up getting the 3rd fall by hitting the Busaku knee, and he locked in the bell lock on MJF. MJF ended up trying to fight, but he had to tap out, so we were tied up again. So there was 10.5 minutes remaining. So Bryan ended up looking to lock in the bell lock again, but MJF ended up reversing that into the salt of the earth. Bryan ended up fighting as best as he could. He eventually escaped the armbar from MJF, and he reversed that into another label lock. So MJF was slipping out of that as best as he could. He was trying to claw his way to the ropes. Bryan ended up rolling through to bring him back to the center of the ring, and there was only 9 minutes left to go. So MJF ended up managing to turn it around on Bryan for a near fall, and then he locked in the salt of the earth again. Bryan started crawling towards the ropes, and MJF ended up pulling Bryan back to the center. So Bryan was struggling hard. He ended up inching his way to the ropes before MJF ended up grabbing that free arm to twist Bryan even worse. So Bryan ended up managing to get his foot on the bottom rope to break the hold, to break the salt of the earth. So we had 7 minutes remaining with both men looking down. They both started to stir, and we saw both of them on their knees trading blows. So we had, at the end of the match, the final seconds started ticking away, and MJF ended up tapping only after the clock ended up running out. So Bryan ended up locking in the single leg crab. So the match at first ended in a draw. So it was 3-3. So the crowd was booing the hell out of that. So Tony Schiavone was given instructions from Tony Khan. Bryan got back to his feet. He was angry. He was waiting to see what happens. Tony Schiavone ended up talking to Justin Roberts and Bryce Rumsberg, and we got an announcement that the match will go on to sudden death because, of course, it was tied up. So the bell ended up ringing. MJF was beside him, think he had won the match. He shoved Bryce Rumsberg, to which Bryce didn't disqualify MJF for that. He ended up shoving MJF back, and we had MJF being rolled up for a near fall by Bryan. MJF ended up sneaking in a low blow, but still only got a near fall. So we have Bryce end up checking on Bryan as MJF ended up stealing the World Championship. Bryce ended up warning MJF that a DQ here could actually lose him the match and lose the title. So MJF gave the belt back to Bryce, but as Bryce ended up sending the title outside, MJF ended up grabbing the ring to attack, to attack Bryan, the Dynamite Diamond ring. So Bryan ended up catching MJF with the Busaku knee. And so Bryan ended up going for the cover, to which MJF ended up kicking out. So we had, at the end, Bryan was knocked out, and MJF ended up locking in the bell lock on Bryan's own finishing signature move. But we had Bryan end up fighting back. MJF ended up pulling back on the crossface, causing Bryan to drop back down. Bryan ended up tapping out. So there you go. MJF ended up winning the match, retaining the World Championship. So pretty much that was basically that. But what a main event this was. This was a awesome, great main event between Bryan and MJF. And then, of course, on the media scrum, you have MJF coming out there, and he's sitting down, and all he's doing is eating pickles. He ate a pickle here. So this is what happens.
I made a cut block right on my left leg and tore my MCL.
So he takes the pickle there, and then he starts gushing over the pickle.
But did
Look
that
at this.
stop me from tapping out the best wrestler in the world? I'm just curious, Dave, did it? No, it fucking didn't.
Look at this.
Oh my God, that's a good fucking pickle. Jesus Christ, classic hill. Everybody want a piece? Really, nobody wants a pickle?
And he calls a guy to come up and try one.
Come here, dipshit, take a pickle. You, fuckface, take a pickle. You, yeah, what are you, fucking deaf?
You gotta love MJF, man. Guy's just that good. Does his job good as a heel. So, but overall, he retains the title. And, of course, good move. MJF is not losing that title very, very soon. He's not. But that was Revolution. Overall, awesome, great show. It was very good show. Even though the build towards the show sucked, it managed to deliver. But anyways, that's it for the AEW Revolution review. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. And I will see you all back here later tonight with the Monday Night Raw review. So until then, see you all later tonight.